You can buy a company, but you can't buy the one sentence that tells you who you really are. No one in the ballroom heard what the single dad whispered to the billionaire CEO. They only saw the impossible. They saw the most powerful woman in the room stop walking. They saw her confident smile disappear. They saw her stare after a man wearing a faded denim jacket as he quietly took his little girl's hand and disappeared into the crowd without asking for a business card, a favor, or even a second glance. For weeks afterward, Victoria Sinclair would replay that moment in her mind every morning before sunrise and every night after the lights of her penthouse faded into silence. She could remember the warmth of his calm voice. She could remember the way he never looked impressed by her wealth. But more than anything, she could remember that single sentence. It refused to leave her heart. 5 days earlier, Ethan Brooks had no idea his life was about to cross paths with one of the richest women in America. Every morning began the same way. At precisely 6:15 a.m., the old coffee maker in his modest Colorado home hissed awake while the scent of fresh coffee drifted through the small kitchen. Outside, early autumn painted the maple trees with brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Inside, 8-year-old Lily Brooks sat at the table coloring a picture of a lighthouse while humming softly to herself. Ethan flipped a pancake with practiced ease before placing it on her plate with a smile that had survived more heartbreak than most people would ever know. "Dad," Lily asked between bites, "do you think important people ever get lonely?" Ethan paused just long enough to consider the question. "Sometimes," he answered gently. "The people surrounded by the biggest crowds can feel the most alone." Lily nodded as if that made perfect sense, then reached for the maple syrup. Ethan smiled, unaware that his simple answer would soon echo through another person's life. Across the city, Victoria Sinclair stood before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Denver. Her company had just closed another billion-dollar acquisition. Financial networks called her unstoppable. Magazines celebrated her discipline, intelligence, and relentless leadership. Her board admired her decisions. Investors trusted her instincts. Employees feared disappointing her. Yet every morning, she found herself staring at the sunrise with the strange feeling that success had become an expensive room with no one waiting inside. Her executive assistant reminded her about the Sinclair Foundation charity luncheon scheduled for Friday afternoon. Victoria almost canceled. Another room filled with cameras, speeches, polished smiles, and carefully rehearsed gratitude sounded exhausting. But something persuaded her to keep the appointment. Neither she nor Ethan could have imagined that among hundreds of guests, one quiet conversation lasting less than 10 seconds would begin changing 2 lives forever. And when Ethan finally leaned close enough to whisper those unforgettable words, Victoria Sinclair would discover that the rarest gift in the world was not honesty, nor kindness, nor even love. It was being truly seen by someone who expected absolutely nothing in return. Friday arrived wrapped in crisp mountain air and brilliant blue skies that made downtown Denver sparkle beneath the morning sun. Ethan Brooks buttoned the only navy shirt he reserved for special occasions before kneeling beside Lily to straighten the ribbon in her hair. She twirled once in front of the hallway mirror, her brown curls bouncing as she laughed. "Do I look fancy enough?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "You look exactly like yourself. That is always enough." Lily grinned and slipped her small hand into his. The invitation to the Sinclair Foundation luncheon had come through the neighborhood community center after Ethan volunteered for several weekend reading programs with local children. He had almost declined, convinced someone else deserved the seat more than he did. But Lily had begged him to come, excited by the promise of music, books, and meeting new people. The Grand Hotel lobby welcomed guests with polished marble floors reflecting soft golden light from towering chandeliers. Fresh white lilies filled crystal vases, and the quiet melody of a piano drifted through the spacious atrium. Like a gentle conversation, well-dressed executives exchanged business cards while photographers captured smiling donors beneath elegant banners celebrating education and opportunity. Ethan felt slightly out of place among tailored suits and designer dresses, yet he never looked uncomfortable. He simply adjusted Lily's backpack on his shoulder and walked with the same calm dignity he carried everywhere else. "Dad, everybody looks important," Lily whispered. Ethan looked around before answering softly. "Every person here is important. Some people just wear more expensive clothes." Lily thought about that for a moment before nodding with quiet satisfaction. Nearby, Victoria Sinclair stepped from a black sedan as cameras immediately flashed around her. Reporters called her name. Investors waved. Board members hurried to greet her before she even reached the entrance. She acknowledged everyone with practiced grace, offering polite smiles and measured words. Yet her eyes revealed a weariness hidden beneath years of discipline. Every handshake felt identical. Every compliment sounded rehearsed. Every conversation circled back to market growth, acquisitions, or headlines. Inside the ballroom, she delivered a flawless opening speech about opportunity, responsibility, and investing in future generations. The audience applauded enthusiastically. She thanked them, smiled once more, and stepped away from the podium. The applause continued, but somehow it felt very far away. At the children's activity corner, Lily noticed a little boy sitting alone with a broken model airplane he could not finish assembling. Without hesitation, she walked over and offered him half of her own craft supplies. Ethan watched quietly from several feet away, saying nothing because kindness never needed instructions. Victoria happened to notice the same moment while escaping another circle of executives eager to discuss partnerships. She slowed her pace. The little girl shared her colored markers without expecting anything back. Her father remained in the background, allowing generosity to happen naturally instead of turning it into a lesson or a performance. Something about that quiet confidence caught Victoria's attention. Most parents rushed to be noticed. Most adults searched every room for someone more powerful than themselves. This man seemed interested only in making sure his daughter felt safe enough to be herself. For reasons she could not explain, Victoria found herself walking toward them instead of toward the waiting cameras. Neither of them realized that the next few minutes would become the beginning of a memory neither heart would ever truly leave behind. Victoria stopped a few feet away, unnoticed at first by everyone except Lily, who looked up with the effortless curiosity only children possess. "Hello," Lily said with a cheerful smile. "Would you like to help us finish the airplane?" One of the executives standing nearby nearly stepped forward to intervene, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of the company's celebrated chief executive being invited to sit on the carpet beside children. Victoria gently raised one hand, silently asking them to stay back. "I have not built a model airplane in a very long time," she admitted. Lily smiled even wider. "That is okay. My dad says people do not forget how to fix things that matter." Victoria glanced toward Ethan for the first time. He offered nothing more than a polite nod. No exagerati desmaid. No attempt to introduce himself. No recognition of who she was. He simply returned to helping another child attach a small cardboard wing. For reasons she could not explain, that felt strangely refreshing. Victoria lowered herself onto one knee, careful not to wrinkle the elegant cream-colored suit that had appeared on the cover of more business magazines than she could remember. Together, she and Lily carefully aligned the tiny pieces until the airplane finally stood upright on its own. The little boy clapped happily while Lily celebrated as though they had completed something extraordinary. "See?" Lily laughed. "Everything works better when people help each other." Victoria smiled, and this one reached her eyes. "I think you might be right." Ethan finally stepped closer. "Thank you for taking the time," he said calmly. "You probably have a schedule that is much more important than paper airplanes." Victoria looked at him for a brief moment before answering. Perhaps this was the most important thing on it. Around them, conversations continued about investments, charitable initiatives, and future expansion plans, but they seemed strangely distant beneath the soft notes of the piano drifting through the ballroom. Ethan picked up a small paper napkin that had fallen beside one of the tables and quietly placed it into a nearby recycling bin without thinking twice. Victoria noticed. So did no one else. She had spent years watching people perform kindness whenever cameras appeared. This man carried it into moments no one else considered worth noticing. One of the event organizers hurried toward Victoria with visible concern. "Miss Sinclair, the press interview is ready whenever you are." She nodded politely, but did not move immediately. Instead, she looked at Lily. "How old are you?" "8," Lily answered proudly. "My birthday was in April." "And what would you like to be someday?" Lily looked toward her father before answering. "Someone who makes people feel less alone." The words settled over Victoria with unexpected weight. She slowly turned toward Ethan. "You have raised an extraordinary daughter." Ethan smiled softly. "Children usually remember what we do much longer than what we tell them." Victoria felt something inside her pause. Those words sounded simple, almost ordinary, yet they carried the quiet truth of someone who had learned life through love instead of ambition. For the first time in years, she found herself wondering about a stranger rather than another opportunity. Ethan gathered Lily's backpack and prepared to leave the children's corner before the afternoon presentations resumed. He still had no idea who Victoria truly was beyond being another volunteer with a kind smile. That simple misunderstanding allowed every word between them to remain honest, free from admiration, expectation, or fear. As Victoria watched father and daughter walk toward the main ballroom together, she realized she had completely forgotten about the interview waiting across the hall, and somehow, for the first time in a very long while, she did not mind at all. The ballroom slowly filled again as guests returned to their assigned tables, crystal glasses catching the warm afternoon light that filtered through the towering windows. Waiters moved quietly between conversations while the soft piano melody gave way to the gentle sound of a string quartet in the corner. Ethan helped Lily settle into her seat with a plate of fresh fruit before excusing himself to refill her glass of lemonade. As he crossed the room, he noticed Victoria standing alone near one of the garden terraces beyond the ballroom doors. For the first time all afternoon, there were no reporters beside her, no executives waiting for her signature, no assistants reminding her where to stand next. She simply looked out across the city skyline, her expression calm but distant. Ethan hesitated for only a moment before walking over. "Beautiful view," he said quietly. Victoria turned with a small smile. "It is." She looked back toward the mountains rising beyond the buildings. "Funny how easy it is to forget they're always there." Ethan nodded. "Some things stay in place even when we stop noticing them." A comfortable silence followed. Neither of them rushed to fill it. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine mixed with fresh flowers from the hotel gardens below. Somewhere inside the ballroom, polite applause erupted for another speaker, but out on the terrace the world seemed remarkably still. Victoria folded her hands together. "Thank you for earlier," she said. "Most people only approach me because they want something." Ethan looked genuinely puzzled. "I was only thanking someone who was kind to my daughter." She studied his face carefully, searching for the familiar signs she had learned to recognize over the years. Curiosity, calculation, admiration, expectation. She found none of them. "You really do not know who I am, do you?" she asked with an amused smile. Ethan smiled back just as calmly. "I know enough." That answer surprised her more than she expected. "And what do you know?" she asked. Ethan glanced toward the ballroom, where Lily was laughing with several children around a table filled with colorful craft projects. "I know you made time for a little. Girl, when nobody expected you to. That usually tells me more about someone than a title ever could." Victoria lowered her eyes for a brief second. She had spent years hearing speeches about leadership, influence, vision, and achievement. Yet somehow this ordinary father had just measured her by one quiet act instead of an entire career. An event coordinator appeared near the terrace entrance. "Miss Sinclair, the board members are ready for the donor photographs." She acknowledged him with a gentle nod. "I will be there in a minute." The coordinator disappeared. Ethan looked at his watch. "Lily and I should probably head home soon. She has a spelling test on Monday, and she insists pancakes help her study." Victoria laughed softly. "Do they?" "She believes they do," Ethan answered. "That is reason enough for me." They exchanged one final smile before Ethan reached for the terrace door. Then, almost as an afterthought, he paused. He stepped just close enough that only Victoria could hear his voice above the distant music. He did not speak dramatically or with rehearsed wisdom. He simply said, "Do not spend your life wondering whether people love you for what you built. Find the ones who would still choose to sit beside you if all of this disappeared tomorrow." Then he gave a polite nod, returned to Lily's side, took her small hand in his, and quietly walked away. Victoria remained motionless. The city skyline blurred beyond the glass. The music faded into silence. Around her, conversations continued, cameras flashed, and applause echoed through the ballroom once more. Yet she heard none of it. Only one sentence remained, repeating itself with gentle certainty inside her heart, refusing to leave. Monday morning arrived with a light snowfall, dusting the rooftops of Denver, turning familiar streets into quiet ribbons of white beneath a pale blue sky. Ethan Brooks followed his usual routine without realizing that someone across the city had begun rearranging hers because of him. At 6:15, coffee filled the kitchen with its familiar aroma, while pancakes browned gently on the griddle. Lily reviewed her spelling words aloud between bites, occasionally stopping to giggle whenever she intentionally exaggerated a difficult pronunciation. Ethan listened patiently, correcting only when she asked for help. Life moved at an ordinary pace, and he preferred it that way. Meanwhile, on the top floor of Sinclair Global Headquarters, Victoria Sinclair stood in front of another wall of glass overlooking the city she had spent years helping shape. A presentation waited inside the executive boardroom. 3 acquisitions required her approval before noon. 2 television interviews had already been scheduled for the afternoon. Yet none of those responsibilities occupied her thoughts. Instead, she found herself staring at the reflection of her own face while quietly repeating the sentence she had heard only once. She had negotiated billion-dollar agreements with remarkable confidence, but somehow one calm stranger had asked a question her success had never answered. Her assistant, Claire Dawson, entered carrying a tablet filled with the day's agenda. "The board is ready whenever you are," Claire said. Victoria remained silent for another moment before asking an unexpected question. "The father from Friday's charity event. Do we have his registration information?" Claire blinked with surprise. "I can find it, only if it was provided voluntarily," Victoria answered. "I did not want anyone feeling investigated." Claire nodded. She had worked beside Victoria for nearly 8 years and had never heard her request information about a guest from any event. Less than an hour later, a single page rested on Victoria's desk. Ethan Brooks, community literacy volunteer, widower, 1 daughter, elementary school, maintenance supervisor. No impressive titles, no expensive memberships, no social headlines. Just a quiet record of volunteer work stretching back several years at libraries, neighborhood food drives, and children's reading programs. Victoria slowly closed the file. The list was remarkably ordinary, yet somehow it carried more weight than the biographies of executives she interviewed every month. There were no photographs of luxury vacations, no awards displayed for public admiration, just consistent acts of service performed without publicity. Across town, Ethan finished repairing a loose classroom bookshelf before greeting students as they hurried through the school entrance with oversized backpacks and winter boots squeaking against polished floors. He knew many of them by name. Some waved enthusiastically. Others stopped simply to tell him about a science project or a basketball game they had played over the weekend. Ethan listened to each child with the same quiet attention he gave Lily every morning. One grateful teacher smiled as she passed. "You always remember what matters to them." Ethan shrugged gently. "Everyone wants to feel like someone noticed they were here." Those words lingered with the teacher long after she continued down the hallway. At almost the exact same moment, Victoria closed another successful board meeting early, something that had never happened before. As executives exchanged surprised glances, she looked once more at the simple page resting beside her notebook. It contained no extraordinary accomplishments by the standards of the business world. Yet for the first time in years, she found herself believing that perhaps the richest life could never be measured by annual reports, but by the quiet number of hearts that felt lighter after crossing paths with a single ordinary person. By Wednesday afternoon, the snowfall had melted into clear sidewalks that reflected the bright winter sun, and life appeared to be moving exactly as it always had. Ethan spent the afternoon replacing worn library shelves at the elementary school before joining Lily for her weekly visit to the neighborhood public library. It had become their favorite tradition since her mother passed away 3 years earlier. Every Wednesday, they borrowed 2 books each, shared hot chocolate afterward, and talked about whatever story had stayed with them the longest. Ethan believed routines could quietly heal wounds that words never fully reached. Lily believed Wednesdays simply felt happier. Across the city, Victoria sat through another strategy meeting, but every discussion about quarterly growth sounded strangely distant. A senior executive enthusiastically presented expansion plans for 3 additional regional offices. Another celebrated projected revenue increases. The room applauded each milestone. Yet Victoria found herself remembering a father who measured success by whether his daughter smiled over pancakes before school. When the meeting finally ended, she closed her laptop instead of opening the next agenda. "Claire," she said softly, "clear the rest of my afternoon." Her assistant looked surprised. "You have 2 investor calls and dinner with the regional directors. Victoria Nadir Pelaitli. Please reschedule them." Less than an hour later, dressed in a simple navy wool coat instead of her usual tailored business attire, Victoria walked into the same neighborhood library Ethan and Lily visited every week. There were no photographers, no security team following a few steps behind, and no announcement that one of the country's most influential business leaders had entered the building. She wanted, perhaps for the first time in years, to experience an ordinary afternoon. The scent of old books mixed with fresh coffee from the small reading cafe near the entrance. Children laughed quietly during story hour, while retired volunteers carefully organized returned novels onto wooden carts. Everything moved with an unhurried rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar to someone whose calendar had been planned in 15-minute increments for more than a decade. Then she saw them. Lily sat cross-legged on a colorful rug, completely absorbed in a chapter book while Ethan patiently repaired the loose binding on another library copy that had nearly fallen apart. No one had asked him to do it. The librarian thanked him anyway. Ethan only smiled. "Books deserve second chances too," he said. Victoria stopped several aisles away, careful not to interrupt. She watched Ethan finish the repair before helping an elderly visitor reach a book from the highest shelf without making the gesture feel remarkable. A few minutes later, he knelt beside a nervous young boy struggling to pronounce difficult words and quietly encouraged him to keep trying. There was never an audience, never an expectation of recognition. Kindness simply appeared wherever he happened to be standing. Victoria suddenly understood why his sentence refused to leave her thoughts. It had not come from someone trying to impress her. It had come from someone who lived exactly the way he spoke. As Ethan and Lily gathered their books and walked toward the cafe for their usual hot chocolate, Victoria remained hidden behind the history shelves, smiling to herself with unexpected warmth. She realized she could have introduced herself again. She could have thanked him once more. Instead, she chose to wait. Some encounters, she sensed, became more meaningful when they were allowed to grow naturally. And for the first time in many years, waiting no longer felt like wasting time. It felt like making room for something genuine to quietly find its way into her life. The following Saturday arrived with bright sunshine and crisp air that invited families outdoors after a week of winter clouds. Ethan promised Lily they would spend the afternoon at Washington Park, where the frozen pond reflected the blue Colorado sky like polished glass. She raced ahead along the walking path with a paper bag of breadcrumbs, stopping every few steps to admire ducks gathered near the shoreline. Ethan carried 2 cups of hot chocolate, smiling as he watched her greet complete strangers with the same cheerful warmth she offered everyone she met. "Dad," Lily called, pointing toward an elderly woman struggling to fold a collapsible lawn chair. "Can we help her?" Ethan did not hesitate. Of course. Together, they walked over, and within moments the chair was secured, and the grateful woman thanked them with genuine appreciation. Ethan wished her a wonderful afternoon and quietly returned to Lily without expecting another word. Kindness, he often believed, should never leave someone feeling indebted. Nearly 50 yards away, Victoria had come to the park hoping to escape another weekend filled with formal dinners and networking events she no longer enjoyed. She wore a simple gray sweater, blue jeans, and a knit cap that allowed her to blend naturally among joggers, parents, and children flying colorful kites across the open field. She had chosen the park because it reminded her of childhood Saturdays before. Success had transformed every hour into another obligation. As she walked beneath towering cottonwood trees, she unexpectedly recognized Lily's unmistakable laugh drifting across the path. Instinctively, she slowed her pace. She watched Ethan kneel beside his daughter as they scattered breadcrumbs for the ducks together. "Remember," Ethan said gently, "leave enough for the next family to enjoy too." Lily nodded immediately. "Because sharing lasts longer?" Ethan smiled. "Exactly." Victoria remained a respectful distance away, unwilling to interrupt a moment that felt beautifully complete on its own. A few minutes later, Lily noticed a little girl standing alone beside the playground, staring at the swings without joining the other children. Without asking permission or worrying about being rejected, Lily walked over and invited her to play. Within seconds, both girls were laughing together as though they had been friends for years. Victoria found herself smiling before she even realized it. Ethan had not simply taught kindness. He had quietly passed it forward until it became part of another generation. She finally gathered enough courage to approach. "Well," she said with a warm smile, "it seems we keep visiting the same places." Ethan turned, pleasantly surprised. "That must mean Denver is smaller than I thought." Lily looked up excitedly. "You helped build the airplane." Victoria laughed softly. "I remember." They began walking together along the path at an easy pace, speaking about favorite books, winter weather, and the best places in the city to find homemade pancakes. Not once did Ethan ask about her profession. Not once did he mention business, headlines, or accomplishments. He treated her exactly as he had during the charity luncheon, as though the person beside him mattered more than the reputation surrounding her. For Victoria, that ordinary conversation felt strangely extraordinary. As the afternoon sun settled lower across the park, painting long golden shadows over the snow, she realized she was no longer trying to understand the sentence Ethan had whispered days earlier. She was beginning to understand the man who had spoken it, and that quiet discovery felt far more valuable than any answer she had been searching for. Over the next several weeks, their paths crossed often enough to feel less like coincidence and more like quiet providence. Sometimes it happened at the neighborhood library, where Lily eagerly searched for new adventure stories while Victoria wandered through the history shelves she had never taken time to explore before. Other afternoons, they met at the small cafe across from the park, where the scent of freshly baked cinnamon rolls drifted onto the sidewalk, and the owner greeted Ethan by name before he even reached the counter. Victoria discovered that he remembered everyone's favorite order, from retired teachers to construction workers beginning an early shift. He carried ordinary conversations with extraordinary attention, making every person feel as though they mattered. She found herself admiring something no annual report could measure. One Thursday evening, Victoria invited Ethan and Lily to attend a community fundraiser supporting children's literacy. "It is not a business event," she assured him with a smile. "Just neighbors trying to help local schools." Ethan accepted after confirming Lily had already finished her homework. The event took place inside a restored historic theater filled with families, volunteers, teachers, and local business owners rather than corporate executives. Children displayed artwork along the entrance while a small jazz trio played softly beneath warm amber lights. Victoria arrived without the formal entourage that usually surrounded her, and for the first time in years, she walked through a public event unnoticed by most people in the room. It felt unexpectedly peaceful. During dinner, Ethan listened as teachers described overcrowded classrooms and aging library collections. He asked thoughtful questions without offering dramatic solutions. Victoria noticed that whenever someone else spoke, he gave them his complete attention. When someone thanked him for volunteering, he quickly redirected the praise toward the librarians and educators who worked every day without recognition. "Good communities are built by people who keep showing up," he said, quietly. Most of them never appear in the headlines. Those words lingered long after the conversation moved on. Later that evening, the event organizer invited Victoria onto the stage to announce a generous scholarship initiative funded by the Sinclair Foundation. The audience applauded warmly as she stepped to the microphone. She spoke about education, opportunity, and believing in the next generation. Then, instead of returning immediately to her reserved table, she looked toward Ethan, sitting quietly beside Lily near the middle of the auditorium. Without mentioning his name, she added one final thought that had not appeared anywhere in her prepared remarks. The greatest investment we can ever make is not in buildings or businesses, she said. It is in becoming the kind of person another human being feels safe remembering. The audience responded with gentle applause, but Ethan simply smiled politely, unaware that his influence had just reshaped the closing message of the evening. After the program ended, several board members approached Victoria with puzzled expressions. One quietly reminded her that she had postponed another high-level investor dinner to attend this community event. Another questioned whether spending so much personal time outside executive circles sent the right message to shareholders. Victoria listened respectfully before answering with calm confidence. Leadership is not diminished by spending time with ordinary people, she said. If anything, it becomes more honest. The conversation ended there, but the concern remained visible on their faces. As Ethan and Lily walked home beneath a sky filled with bright winter stars, laughing together about a drawing Lily hoped to finish before school on Monday, neither of them realized that Victoria had just taken the first public step away from the life everyone expected her to choose, and one quiet step closer to the life her heart had slowly begun to recognize. Nearly 1 year later, spring arrived in Denver with flowering cherry trees lining quiet neighborhood streets and warm sunshine spilling across front porches where families lingered a little longer before going inside. Ethan Brooks still woke at 6:15 every morning to make pancakes for Lily before school. The coffee maker still hummed faithfully in the corner of the kitchen. The little house had not become larger. The furniture had not become more expensive. The rhythm of life remained beautifully familiar. Yet something precious had quietly changed. Victoria Sinclair no longer measured her calendar by board meetings alone. She still led her company with wisdom and discipline, but she had learned to leave the office before sunset whenever she could. Wednesday afternoons were now reserved for library visits with Lily. Saturday mornings belonged to neighborhood volunteer projects. She discovered that fulfillment grew strongest in the ordinary moments she once hurried past. One Saturday evening, Ethan invited Victoria and Lily to help prepare dinner together. The kitchen filled with laughter as flour dusted the countertop and homemade pizza baked slowly in the oven. Lily proudly declared herself the official taste tester, while Ethan pretended to negotiate with her over the proper amount of cheese. Victoria laughed so freely that tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unfamiliar comfort of belonging somewhere without needing to earn her place. After dinner, they carried mugs of hot chocolate onto the back porch. The sky glowed with shades of orange and soft lavender as birds settled into the trees for the evening. Lily rested her head against Victoria's shoulder while reading the final chapter of a library book aloud. When she finished, she smiled sleepily. "I think home is wherever people are happy to see you walk through the door." Ethan looked toward Victoria. She smiled quietly before answering. "I think you are right." After Lily went inside to brush her teeth, silence settled gently across the porch. It was the kind of silence that never felt empty because trust had already filled every space between words. Victoria looked out toward the fading sunset before finally speaking. "I never told you why your sentence stayed with me." Ethan listened without interrupting. "When I was young," she continued softly, "my father built a small hardware store. He always worried that people only respected him because they needed something. Before he passed away, he told me that success would become a lonely place if I ever forgot how to recognize sincere hearts. I spent years chasing achievements and somehow forgot his voice. Then you reminded me in one quiet moment." Ethan smiled gently. Maybe you never forgot. Maybe you only needed someone to help you hear it again. Victoria reached for his hand, not because she needed rescuing, but because she had finally found someone who never tried to change who she was. She simply whispered, "I finally understand what you gave me that day." Ethan shook his head with a peaceful smile. "You already had it. You just believed it was missing." Inside the house, Lily laughed as she called them to see the drawing she had finished. Ethan and Victoria stood together before walking inside without another word. The porch light remained glowing behind them as the evening grew still. Wealth had never built that moment. Titles had never created it. What filled that little home was something far quieter and infinitely stronger. Respect freely given, grace quietly received, a second chance gently accepted, and somewhere beyond the fading daylight, the sentence that once echoed inside one lonely heart no longer sounded like a question. It had become the foundation of a life where being truly seen mattered more than being endlessly admired.